So here is your list of basic tier IaaS VMs, and these are really minimalist basic VMs that you might throw up as a proof of concept, but are really not high performing VMs. You can see here that they range from 768 megabytes of RAM through to 14 gig. 14 gig's not bad, but remember that these are going to be on traditional disks. You can see here that you've got a maximum temp disk size of 240 gigabytes. You can actually attach to an A4 up to 16 data disks, and you can have actually 8 CPU cores assigned to that VM. But that's just your basic tier. Let's now talk about your standard tier. Now, your standard tier A series, I've actually separated this list into two lists. You can see we've got A0 through A7, and you can see in green I've made it A8 through A11. And you can see as we start off with A0, we start off with just one core, we've got one NIC, and we've got 760 meg of RAM. And then we get up to an A7 where we can have 8 cores, 56 gig of RAM, 4 network cards. We can have a temp disk that's 605 gigabytes in size. We can have up to 16 data disks attached to that VM, and that's got a 16 times 500 IOPS per second performance on the disk. Then you've got the A8, A9, A10 and A11 VMs. And the difference between these and the A4, A5, A6 and A7 VMs is that they're basically on better hardware. So very similar specifications, but they're on better hardware. However, not hardware that's so awesome that it's got SSDs and so on, which is later tiers, but this is where the hardware is. Now, one of the other things that you need to understand about the way that Microsoft's gone and named these VMs is that they've sort of started at the beginning of the alphabet, and as they introduce new classes of virtual machines, they use another letter of the alphabet, or they use higher increments. This way they're not sort of saying, well, we've got premium class A gold plus VM or something like that. It's simply that they'll keep going. So some stage there might be an A900 virtual machine, there might be a Z series, and so on. Okay, so let's talk about your standard tier D series IaaS VMs. Now remember, D series compared to A series have faster processors, higher memory to core ratio, and an SSD temp disk. The operating system disk on a D series VM is still running on magnetic media. So that's going to be a bit slower than your high performance SSD. So your temp disk is SSD. And remember, your temp disk is not persistent. If you reboot the workload, if you shut it down, you lose all the data sitting on the temp disk. You keep all the data on the data disks, you keep all the data on the OS disks, but you lose all of that data on the temp disks. So you can see here with the D1, we've got one core, and the D1, the basic VM in the D series, has 3.5 gig of RAM, one NIC. You go out to the D14, you can have up to 16 cores, 112 gigabytes of RAM, up to 16 network adapters, up to 32 data disks, and your temp disk size is 800 gigabytes. And you can see there that instead of that earlier performance, we've actually got much better performance. We've got 500 IOPS on each data disk, which compared to the basic tier VMs, which were down at 300 IOPS. And it's the same IOPS as the A series, though, of course. When we go to the DV2 series, the main difference between the DV2s and the Ds is that the processor in the DV2 is actually about 35% faster. So you're going to see a substantial performance increase. Now, the thing you've got to ask yourself is, do you need that performance? Are you fine with a D, or do you need to go to a DV2? Because it's fairly obvious to guess that a DV2 is going to be more expensive than a D series. And guess again, here's another wonderful table. Well, at least I'm making them different colors to give you something to look at. Again, as I said, if you really want to drill down into these tables, just hit pause and have a look at them. So our DS series IaaS VMs have premium storage. So the difference between these and the earlier ones is it's all SSD, baby. It's all fast. The IOPS are fantastic. Okay, you're going to pay a lot more for this, but this is where you're starting to get into your blazing performance VMs. And again, you're going to ask yourself, do I really need these fast, expensive VMs? Or can my application, can my workload that I'm deploying into Azure actually get away with something a bit slower? Now, the main thing you need to remember about your G series VMs is that they go large. They go crazy large. They go huge. So your standard G series, they're still on magnetic for the OS disk and SSD for the temp disk, but a G5 series VM has up to 32 cores. Actually, it does have 32 cores. You go and allocate it, you get 32 cores. It has up to 448 gigabytes of memory. It has up to 16 NICs. And it has performance of 64 times 500 IOPS per disk. It uses an Intel Xeon E5 V3 processor at the moment, and I'm sure as newer VMs come online, the G series, this is going to get bigger and crazily bigger. Now, if you want to go your absolute Rolls-Royce option, your Rolls-Royce option is your GS series IaaS VMs, because these guys have got your operating system disks sitting on a high-performance, low-latency SSD. They have a massive cache size. If you look at a GS5, that has a cache size of 4.2 gigabytes. It goes up to 448 gig of RAM. It's got 16 NICs. It's got 32 cores. Now, one of the things that obviously running this would really be expensive. However, one of the things to sort of take note of is that Microsoft is working towards, or actually has in Server 2016, nested virtualization. So in theory, you could spin up one of these babies, put on Hyper-V, and then run VMs inside it. And that would allow you to have a whole virtual machine lab running in Azure, because one of the things you can't do with Azure at the moment is, of course, snapshot and revert. Well, you could put Hyper-V on one of these guys, and then you could go and do that. In fact, I'd only need probably a GS2, and that would basically represent my main work laptop, which has got 64 gig of RAM. So something to consider.